here, I'd like to thank our partners for their support and involvement in helping to recognize the South Shore of Prince Edward County as an important natural area that deserves protection. This is the last stretch of undeveloped shoreline on Lake Ontario and is host to at least 41 species.
Get closer for you.
In addition to being a place where locals and visitors can enjoy nature. It's great that we can all come together to help reach this goal. The South Shore Joint Initiative engages local residents and policymakers to highlight the importance of conserving the South Shore and encourages people to get out into nature. And you can see pictures of our board and key folks on the screen right now. In terms of outreach, we have undertaken and continue to make presentations to municipal council and municipal local partners and groups. We have ongoing engagement with our provincial member of parliament, Todd Smith, our federal member of parliament, Neil Ellis, and their office staffs. We present a series of public Zoom webinars, which have become the popular thing to do in the era of Zoom. And we have established a Hudgen House Restoration Subcommittee, which is guiding the restoration of the Hudgen log house on the Hudgen Rose Nature Reserve. In terms of communications, we're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, and we publish a bi-monthly newsletter, which is emailed out to all members and supporters and contacts in our database. In addition, we carry out public events and online engagement activities, including the very famous Cheryl Anderson strolls on the South Shore, which we're attempting to do at least one of every month this year. So now to introduce our guest for this evening. Terry Sprague, as many of you probably know, is a naturalist who lives in Prince Edward County. His weekly columns on nature appear in local newspapers for 50 years. He has held positions at the Glenora Fisheries Research Station and as interpretive naturalist at both Sandbanks Provincial Park for 8 years and Quinte Conservation for 17 years. He is the recipient of multiple conservation awards. I recall well when we first moved to the county almost 7 years ago now, getting the Picton Gazette and discovering Terry's column, which we avidly followed every week until it ceased. Terry is, of course, now active on Facebook and posting probably as much useful information as ever. Pamela Stagg is the host of the popular radio program on County FM, The County Naturally. After her career as a writer and internationally known botanical painter, she chose to use her retirement to teach adults about nature. Was also an birder and has given bird identification workshops and presentations on conservation-related topics across Eastern Ontario. So I'm going to unshare my screen now so that everybody can see Terry and Pamela a little bit larger size on your screen, and you folks can take it away.
Welcome, Terry. I always enjoy talking to you.
Thank you. It's always a pleasure. As you can see, I've got my hiking uniform on, all ready to go.
Oh, I'm dreaming of kayaking, but the water's a little hard out there. Today's topic is conservation, more specifically, teaching people about conservation. I know that's a topic dear to your heart.
Well, it is, and I've always been interested in conservation and nature ever since I was just a small boy growing up on the farm, and in later years actually teaching about it. So it's been a wonderful, wonderful lifetime for me.
I'd like to start by going way back to those days on the farm on Big Island. That was a great place to start a career promoting nature. What was it that first caught your attention about the natural world?
Well, I think every farmer is interested in nature to some degree, and they wouldn't be in that business if they weren't. But for me, I think it went a little bit further than that. I had this need, for lack of a better word, to take it one step further, to learn what these plants and animals and birds and so forth were that I was looking at. And beyond that, just trying to determine, why they were there, what they were doing. In other words, what we call today is biodiversity. We called it the web of life back then.
You had a teacher who really fostered your interest in nature. Tell me about that experience.
Foster is a good word because that was her name, Marie Foster. And she was my teacher in grades 6, 7, and 8. And I think we hit it off right from the very start because she would tell us all these stories about birds coming to her hand, and we'd all be gathered around. I was in grade 5 at that time, grade 6. And, some of the kids would just, shrug their shoulders and say whatever and walk off. But I stayed there and I listened to her stories, and we had conversations back and forth. So I think we really hit it off right from the first day that I met her.
How did your interest in nature grow as a result of that teacher?
Well, I started to learn what I could from the few references that I had, and that wasn't very much. One book, and I laugh about it now, I got it right here, as a matter of fact. It's called Birds of Ontario. I know it appears backwards to everyone looking. Birds of Ontario by Thomas McElrath. And the book was written back during the days when people tended to concentrate on categorizing birds into good or bad or somewhere in between. And he was no exception. You'd read this, and you wonder, was this the direction that I'm supposed to go? And each chapter, relate these glowing stories about all these beautiful songbirds that he had seen. And then he would go on and say that, he had shot one of these for his own personal collection. So, that really did confuse me. My interest sort of subsided during the high school days for obvious reasons, because back in those days, of course, the last thing you did was to admit to your classmates, that you were a bird watcher. But one day I was walking down Main Street and I happened to bump into Marie Foster. This was after I finished high school. And we started talking, and I decided to go down and pay her a little visit. She lived in Northport, which was just a stone's throw from my house. And this would have been probably in April, and she had all these gorgeous purple finches coming to her bird feeders, and that hooked me right then and there. She didn't know too much about them. She just knew that they appeared every late March or April, and then they left, and that was good enough for her. So that sort of got me on the go. Then just going on from there, one thing just sort of led into another. I knew the late Phil Dodds, who was the editor of the Picton Gazette at that time, and he was a bit of a bird watcher. And he suggested, actually demanded, that I write a column. And this was, would have been around December of 1965. So I started writing a column, but he never told me when to stop. So I wrote it for 50 years. Something like 6,200 columns, I guess I ended up with, just retiring it a few years ago. But I had a lot of mentors along the way, and one of them was Helen Quilliam of Kingston, who really provided me with a lot of information about birds of the area, because the Kingston Field Naturalists had been going to Prince Edward Point. Another one was Orville Kelly of Brighton, who wrote a column in the Trentonian 3 times a week, actually. Doug Sadler was another one from Peterborough, who wrote his column, Come With Me Quietly, in the Peterborough Examiner. So there was no absence of mentors along the way.
There were 2 conferences that were very important in your earlier life. What were those?
Well, yeah, there were 2. And let's just jump ahead a little bit to 2002, and then we'll go back to the first one that I attended, because they're both kind of tied in together. In 2002, the staff members of Quinte Conservation nominated me to receive the Laterno Pioneer Award. And this is an award that is given out to several people every year. And every year they have a conference at the Nottawasaga Inn in Alliston, which is just south of Barrie. So I had to drive up there to get this award. And I stood there in front of 900 people, believe it or not. That's about how many attend this conference every year, with the exception of this year, of course, because of the pandemic. And I stood up there in front of all these people and I thought, oh my God, you know, these people probably only know Art Laterno by name only, associated with the conference. Where I knew him personally, and I first met him in 1969 when he got in touch with me one day after I had been doing some promotion of his program that he had initiated called the Junior Conservationist Award program. And he said he wanted to repay me in some small way. And his small way was sponsoring my attendance to the Federation of Ontario Naturalists annual conference in Niagara Falls. And he had grown up on a farm himself, so he knew how difficult it was to get away. You know, you got to get back from milking, of course. So I was there for 3 days, and he paid all my expenses, the conference expenses, my transportation, my lodging, the whole thing. And he told me then that he was very fortunate to have income from various sources. And he could afford it, no problem at all. Now imagine, if you will, you know, a farm boy who has never been away from home overnight, let alone, you know, for a whole weekend. Just, you know, it was just a big thrill. And I'd never been to Niagara Falls in my life, so it was a double experience. And Art, that's the way Art was. He was known for helping people, helping young people in particular. And when he said he had income from various sources, I had no idea how much income he had. And when he passed away, he had acquired an estate of over $2 million. And much of it was willed to the University of Guelph and to other various conservation endeavors, including the conference that I attended in 2002. So it was a real privilege to call this man my friend.
What impact did those conferences have on you?
Well, they had a big impact on me, Pamela. The FON conference in Niagara Falls, I guess, sort of paved the way in the knowledge that, if you pardon me from being so graphic, there was more to life than being an authority on which way to drive when in a wind, when spreading a load of manure. And I knew there was a lot more out there that, you know, that I probably had skills to do. And the Laterno conference that I attended in Alliston sort of made me realize, hey, this is my path. This is where I need to go. And maybe, just maybe, you know, I can make an impact on other people like Art Laterno did on me. Of course, you know, yeah, I did get a few awards along the way, including that Laterno award, but, you know, we do these things not for the glory, but because, you know, we enjoy what we're doing. So I just said, okay, here I go. I'm going to, you know, perfect my skills and do the best I can, and doing what I do, as we say in the county, even more better.
Let's skip forward to when your dad sold the family farm. After a stint at Glenora Fisheries Research Station, you began working at Sandbanks as an interpretive naturalist. What was it like switching from learning about nature to teaching others about nature?
Oh God, my life was just getting better and better all the time, every year. I was at Glenora Fisheries for, I guess it was 5 years, and then I received an offer to be the assistant park naturalist at Sandbanks Provincial Park. And it was a position that I held for 8 years, or 8 summers. And I think it was here that I realized that I knew enough about nature that I could teach what I knew and learn the rest as I went along. And I soon learned. I was nervous when I first started because I didn't think I knew enough to really carry it through. But you have to realize that these people who came to Sandbanks, a lot of them, never got out of an office environment. So everything that I told them was brand new. So it was a great experience, and being able to instill an interest in them about the park and the natural and cultural history of the park and how important it was to preserve this. My whole goal was so that they would learn a little more than what they initially knew when they came here, and that was very satisfying.
What facets of nature really caught their attention?
Well, I think almost anything did. Most of them knew nothing about nature, so anything I told them was, was really interesting. Their careers, that was their whole life. And so this was an opportunity for them to get out into nature and learn new things. But I think what interested them the most was when I started to go on and on about how all these plants at Sandbanks, for instance, how important they were and how they all interacted and how they were important to the animals that lived there. I think that fascinated them the most.
Were there any special hooks or techniques that you used to grab their attention?
Yes, there was, and I was I was quite often admonished by the supervisors, none of which ever came to the park or attended any of the different things that we did, like the evening programs and the guided hikes. They were making their decisions from climate-controlled offices and didn't really know the park people like I did. They were saying that I was being too informal. I was just wasn't doing it in a real serious manner like I should be. Yeah, I wore my uniform, of course. I represented the M&R properly, but everything else, I was just, I tried to be more informal. I wanted to become part of the camping scene. I wanted them to think that I was a friend rather than someone who was, way up there above them. I didn't want to make it a classroom setting because they had left the classroom to enjoy a more informal experience at Sandbanks. So, when I did an evening program, for instance, rather than stand up on the stage stiff as a ramrod and introduce myself, I would come out from behind the screen, grab the microphone and say, "Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Sandbanks Provincial Park." And it got them in a lively, relaxed mood. And the supervisors above us, who I never met, they said, "Well, you should be playing some soft, dreamy music as they come into the evening program." Well, I said, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not going to play hard rock or anything like that, but I played a lot of big band music like Bert Kempfert and James Last, even a little bit of Guy Lombardo. And they loved that. It was relaxing, and it didn't put them to sleep. And I would always start my programs with a joke. It was a Sandbanks related joke. I just rewrote the thing so it would be Sandbanks related. And I got them laughing. And, I wanted them to have a good time while learning at the same time.
I always say that laughter is the sound of learning, and it sounds like your group proved that.
Well, when I talk to them after the programs, they say, "You really enjoy your job, don't you?" I said, "I sure do." He said, "Well, it shows." And, I think you can get the message of conservation across to them far better if you, keep the atmosphere light and lively.
How difficult was it for this audience to grasp the importance of conservation?
Well, using my unconventional approach, I think it was quite easy, actually, because they could clearly see that I enjoyed, interpreting nature and trying to make sure they had a good time. And I got to know a lot of these campers. Some of them would even invite me to their campsites after work for supper, and that was really special to me. So it was a good experience, and I think they learned a lot. And if they can go home with one little piece of information, we've had a good day, I think.
After Sandbanks, you moved to Quinte Conservation and your dream job. Tell me about that.
Well, Sandbanks was a seasonal job just in the summer months. And I had the good fortune of getting a short-term position at the Prince Edward Region Conservation Authority in Picton at Macaulay Mountain. And it was an unemployment program called Section 38. And the general manager then was Terry Murphy. And he said, well, can you maybe do a couple slideshows for us on Macaulay Mountain? I said, sure. So I did that and then went back to Sandbanks. And then Terry Murphy kept hiring me back during the off season and extending my contracts a little further along so that I could use up all that off time that I had. He had me doing different things like shoreline management and mapping and zoning bylaws and stuff that I never learned before. And it was all very interesting. These were all new things. So as the contracts got shorter at Sandbanks, he just kept, finding the money somehow to keep me on longer. And then eventually it made sense for me to start working there full time. Well, by this time, Terry Murphy had moved to Belleville, where he became general manager of the Moira Conservation Authority. So I was happily working. I hated to leave Sandbanks, but I was happily working full time for the Conservation Authority in Picton for a few years and until 1995. And that was when the budget, the Harris budget cuts came down, and there were 5 of us who were laid off from the Conservation Authority, and there were only I think 8 to start with. So that completely crushed the Conservation Authority, and it basically folded up. Well, by this time, Terry Murphy had been working on a plan to try and amalgamate the 3 authorities, the Napanee and the Moira and the Prince Edward, as one unit to become Quinte Conservation. And I was absolutely devastated because here I was in my 50s. I didn't have a clue what in the world, I would be doing, who would hire me or anything like that. On top of which, the very week that I was laid off, my dog of 16 years passed away. So I was a basket case. And then Terry Murphy called up and he said, well, I just want you to know that I'm going to hire you back as soon as we get our finances straightened out. So I went back, I guess, in a couple or 3 months working out of the Belleville office of Quinte Conservation, and I didn't really know what I was going to be doing. And he called me into his office one day and he said, and Terry always talked like this with his hands folded in a kind of a prayer position. And he says, I want you to come up with an outdoor program. And I almost felt like saying, say what? This was a dream thing for me. He wanted me to do some guided hikes, some presentations, basically anything. I was sort of the goodwill ambassador, anything to get people out into the conservation areas and other natural areas that we had within our jurisdiction, which was 6,200 square kilometers. And I started doing that, and that program just continued to grow. I expanded it to include kayak and canoe tours. I even did aerial tours out of First Nations Air Service in Desirado. The whole idea was to anything I could do to get people out and enjoying, what we had out there. So I did that for about, I guess 15 years or so, and the program just got bigger and bigger and bigger. Like I was doing it basically all by myself. So I did all those. I even did some tours to Maine Duck Island. I started them in 2000, I think it was. So I was doing them once a week through the summer months. And they all went very well. I even considered an outing one time to explore the Moira Caves. And I went in with a guide, and I soon determined that cave exploring was not for me. I don't like dark recesses, and I don't like confined areas. Now, all I could think of when I was down there with my flashlight on was, this is the day when an 8-point earthquake is going to come and completely bury me. So it was a program that really, really grew over the years.
What was it that drew people to your programs and kept increasing what you were doing?
Well, Quinte Conservation already had programs in place for kids. There were the programs at the H.R. Frink Center at Plainfield, north of Belleville. And we had the summer day camp for kids in 3 different locations. So as far as the youth was concerned, they were pretty much covered, which suited me fine because I don't work that well with kids. I can't seem to get down to their level. The programs I did appealed mainly to seniors, and they loved it. I mean, I had seniors in their 80s on these guided hikes. They would, sign up every year. And I think for them, they were proving to themselves that, yes, I may be X number of years old, but I can still do this. And so our groups expanded from just a handful of people to about 25 or 30 on any given hike. And gradually I improved those programs by having a volunteer who kind of took up the position in the middle and did her own little interpretive stops there. And then I had someone at the tail end whose job was mainly to take pictures. But whenever I saw her, I knew that, okay, we've got everybody together. We haven't lost anybody over the escarpment, at least to the best of my knowledge. And we just kept perfecting it. I refused actually to take along an audio system, a loudspeaker, because I thought that would really take away from, the atmosphere. So, yeah, they just kept growing.
You then took the giant step of starting your own business. You must have felt there was enough interest in nature to sustain that business.
Well, I already had nature stuff tours and things since 1989, but it was kind of laying dormant when I was working for Sandbanks and Quinte Conservation. And eventually, Terry Murphy came to me and he said, well, I don't think Quinte Conservation will run your programs anymore. It's been 15 years and it's been a good run. He says, however, if you want to take those same programs that you developed for Quinte Conservation and do them under your own banner, that's fine. You have my blessing. So I thought that was pretty decent of him. And the only problem was I was responsible for my own liability insurance. And that just brought me right to my knees. I only ran the program for about 3 years. Well, by that time, I was ready to more or less retire anyway. But at that time, the one benefit of doing them on my own was now I was able to expand beyond Quinte Conservation boundaries and do some of these really wonderful locations like Goodrich Loomis Conservation Area and so forth in the Lower Trent region. We also went to Peters Woods. Where else did we go? The Northumberland County Forest. We even went as far as the Alderville Black Oak Savanna. And then in the other direction, we did a lot of hikes in Kingston at Lemoyne Point Conservation Area and Parrots Bay. There are just so many natural areas, and we never really did get a chance to explore everything.
When you ran your business, you taught courses, you acted as a guide for bus tours, you wrote articles, you maintain a website, you led hikes, and you're still leading hikes. What topics have been the most interesting to your audiences?
Well, that's kind of hard to answer. I think birds, probably, understandably, because that's my strength. Tends to interest the most people. And, they always generate a big audience. I did workshops for a while on bird identification, and I always, every year, had between 25 and 30 at those workshops. And 1 year, I was feeling particularly ambitious. I did a 6-week bird identification course in Belleville at Quinte Conservation. I did one at the Frink Center. This was the same winter. And I did one in Kingston at a location down there off Princess and Montreal Street. Matt Allerbeck, who's a well-known herpetologist, he was there with me too. He had his own little display set up, so that went very well. And I also did one in a private home, all the same year, as well as a backyard naturalization workshop. So it was a little overzealous on my part, but I enjoyed it.
I'd like now to look at where education about nature and conservation is going in the future. There's no question that the county is changing. We're seeing a lot of people moving in from the city, and often when they arrive, they may not know anything about nature, but maybe something has caught their interest about the natural world. In your experience, how do you reach these people and teach them about preserving what we have here?
Well, I think we have to continue working through the organizations where it has been happening, such as Sandbanks. You know, they have their own interpretive program. And while I'm on that topic, I make no bones about it. Sandbanks is really in danger of drifting into West Lake if we don't be careful and somehow control the masses of visitors. When I worked there, we had if we had 300,000 people in a season, we thought we had a really busy year. Well, those numbers have jumped to between 700 and 800,000 people per year for the past 7 or 8 years. And that is really too many. How much more pressure can you put on a sensitive environment before something terrible begins to happen? So I think we need somehow to keep pushing, to keep driving the message home that if we lose what we've had, we're never going to get it back. And I think we need to get past this mindset that at the end of the day, it's all about money, it's all about revenue. So continued environmental education, I guess, is the key. Just keep pounding away and hope the message gets through.
Do you have venues that you think might work apart from, you worked as a naturalist at Sandbanks. Are there other venues where you can teach adults about nature?
Well, there are, not me personally, but there are, of course, lots of very good programs on the internet. YouTube, for example, has just a plethora of different environmental programs, and TV. I haven't subscribed to TV in quite a few years, but I imagine, there's lots available out there. They're out there. The information is out there. It's just a case of tapping into it.
Mm-hmm. The other important audience for conservation education is young people. They're growing up in a much more technological world than we ever did. In fact, some of them simply won't go anywhere that doesn't have Wi-Fi. Is there a way to harness technology to get them interested in nature?
Well, tell me about it. On one of my trips to Maine Duck Island, we were charging, I think it was like $150 per person. I remember there was this one couple, man and wife, who took their teenage daughter with them. So, $150 a pop, that amounted up quite a bit for that particular tour. Well, during that whole 2-hour guided hike that I did from the harbor to the lighthouse, and where I talked about the history, the natural history and the cultural history, that girl never looked up from her phone. She heard absolutely nothing about what I was trying to say and teach. And that's kind of sad, but we can still use that same technology, I think, to guide them in the right direction. It's just a case of, getting them out there and showing them how this technology, this electronic technology, can work in their favor. Like I mentioned earlier, I think there's all kinds of information on internet and YouTube about nature, and it's just a case of we just got to keep plugging along. And I think that we have programs here, for instance, the Get Out Kids Club operated through the Prince Edward Point Bird Observatory is one. So there are programs out there designed for kids, and all they have to do is be introduced to them, I guess.
Once you've got their attention, what facet of the natural world do you think would be of the greatest interest to kids and young people?
Well, again, I think birds, because they're captivating, you know, they're colorful. And if I can use my own past experience as an example, uh, but it's interesting, you know, when I worked at Sandbanks, kids would bring me the darndest things. I remember this one young boy, he brought me this jar of water and he said, "What's in this jar?" And I said, "Water?" You know, and he said, "No, down here in the corner." And there was this little tiny red water mite that he had somehow seen. Goodness knows what he was doing at the time. He must have been in the outlet marsh, I guess, you know, just doing some pond studies on his own. But he had found this little thing, and I told him about red water mites and you know what they did and their life history and so forth, and he went away fascinated. At the other end of the stick, there was this one boy who came into the office one time, visitor center, and he was just crying uncontrollably, and he had a map turtle with him that he had seen older boys take a campsite hatchet to and completely riddled that turtle. And he was just sobbing. And he left it with us, and the turtle died very soon after he left. But that experience will always move me because there was no car outside. He must have walked the 2 kilometers all the way from the outlet river to the office, you know, cradling this poor map turtle. It was a huge one. You know, he was so broke up by it. So the interest is there for sure. I think some kids, of course, love snakes. Others don't. It's just a case of, you know, where their interest lies and you know, focus on that. And maybe everything else will fit in later, like it did with me. I started with birds and then I eventually got interested in other things. People seem to be interested in bats. The programs I do on bats have become really, really popular through the years. People want to learn about snakes and bats and all the creepy crawlies.
Well, you mentioned snakes, and I was down at Black River one day, and these 2 kids were huddled over a cell phone, and they came over to me. They wanted an audience, and they had seen 2 water snakes fighting over a fish or a frog or something, and they had recorded it on the cell phone, and they just wanted to share it. It was very exciting.
Well, this is the type of thing, you know, that gets kids captivated. All they have to do is find something like that, discover something like that, and they're on their way, you know, to other things, even greater.
Young people are tomorrow's stewards of nature. What's the most important lesson they need to learn about conservation?
I think in a nutshell, if we expect to see and enjoy nature tomorrow, we must enjoy and protect it today. I think, you know, in a nutshell, that's it. We must, you know, protect not only the animals and the plants, but their habitats as well. Benjamin Franklin said, and I did steal this off the Prince Edward Point Bird Observatory website, and I think, I mean, I really love this statement. It's so true. He says, "Tell me and I'll forget. Teach me and I'll remember. Involve me and I'll learn." Truer words are never spoken.
Yes. Terry, before we move into questions from the audience, is there anything else you would like to add about teaching people about conservation?
Well, no, nothing that I can think of, except to say that while I'm immensely flattered by being invited to speak on this subject and relate my own personal thoughts and experiences, I have to stress that I'm by no means an expert. People on Facebook are, you know, you quite often see these comments, "Well, contact Terry Sprague, he's the expert." I don't think any of us are experts. We may be, well, you know, more versed in certain areas than others. But, you know, I don't think any of us are experts at all. I'm always learning. And I'm learning new things every day, and it seems, and that's what makes interesting, or makes nature so interesting, is just the discovery of the unexpected. And you know, here I am, 76 years old, and I just learned something new yesterday. And did you know that members of the grebe family actually eat their own downy feathers, and they also feed their downy feathers to their young. And do you know why that is? It
No.
serves as a filter, apparently, in what do they call the prioria or pylorus? Pylorus. It's that section between the stomach and where it enters into the intestine, and it filters out any of the bony material that needs more time to digest before it goes through the digestive system. I thought that was fascinating, and I continue to learn these things. And that's what makes the study of nature so interesting, is learning all these new things.
Yes, I'm constantly learning new things, and it really is fascinating. We just have to hope that we can pass that fascination on to newcomers to the county, and also especially the youth.
Absolutely.
Terry, as always, it's a great pleasure talking to you. And now it's time to take some questions from the audience. Would you put them in the chat box, please? And I am just going to open up and see what we have here. Lots and lots of questions. Okay. How do we balance the challenge between protecting fragile areas and bringing people to learn about them? We point out something interesting that we want to protect and create a stampede likely to stamp out the very life we want to protect. And Sandbanks, and I guess Little Bluff too now, are examples of this. Should they have limited entry controlled by tickets to prevent them being overrun?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't know what the answer is. We do have a serious situation in Prince Edward County. Prince Edward Point, for instance, my wife and I used to go down there in the summer and not see a soul. We'd be all alone. And I went down there this year in July just to have a look around, and I couldn't hardly get through for people. It was like being at Sandbanks. And this is going to be a continuing problem as our area continues to be discovered, so to speak. What the answer is, I don't really know. There's got to be some way to control them in a very sensitive manner so that all can enjoy what we have here, but in a more controlled fashion. And I don't really know the answer. I don't know how we can accomplish that.
It's a tough one, and certainly in researching issues like this, there are areas in the States where some areas are closed forever to tourists or to anyone. Some are closed for 10 years to let them regenerate. I think that's something that park and land managers have to look at very carefully. I have another question here about McMahon Bluff, which is absolutely gorgeous. And this person says, could you give me your thoughts on McMahon Bluff's future and on the future for appropriate accessibility?
I'm sorry, what was, did you say Little Bluff?
McMahon Bluff, the
McMahon Bluff.
Yes,
okay.
Down at Black River, which has just been donated to the Nature Conservancy.
Well, there certainly has to be controlled access. There's no doubt about that, because it's pointless to set aside these special areas that have never before seen many people and then suddenly open them up to throngs of people. There has to be controlled access there. It has to be done under the leadership of a guide. There definitely has to be control. There's no doubt about it, especially at McMahon Bluff. I mean, that's a mesa. That's that's the only mesa that we have in this area, and it's got some very special vegetation up there.
Yes. Here's another one, a very different question. What is your advice for those just starting out in their conservation careers? Do you know of any good resources for boosting knowledge in that regard?
I can't really go by my own example, because I had the good fortune of never really having ever to apply to a job. They were handed to me, and I basically learned as I went. I did take a wildlife management course one time and got a diploma for that, but it was generated out of the United States, and you know, their rules and regulations are a little bit different there in their concepts. I don't really know the answer. I guess it's who you know can maybe guide you along the way. Yeah, you have to start out somewhere. When I worked at the Conservation Authority, we had all kinds of government-assisted programs, student programs, and this was the way that they kind of got into the business too, and they went on to great things. So just join up with somebody, I guess, and see how far and where it goes.
And there still are summer programs at places like Sandbanks and Presqu'île where students can apply for jobs.
Oh, yeah. I'm just thinking back to the days at the Conservation Authority in Picton when we had so many students, we didn't know what to do with them all. You know, we tapped into all these incentive programs, and I was in charge of a few of the students. And it was a struggle to try to find them, you know, meaningful things to do rather than just, you know, pick up garbage every day.
I guess it depends on the level of the student too, because I interviewed someone over at Sandbanks, and he was doing either a master's or a PhD that involved studying turtles. And he had mapped the turtle routes in Presqu'île so that they could locate the turtle safety tunnels under the roads in the best places possible. So it's partly coming up with interesting thesis topics like that can further a career. And on that topic, we have a question. Which job do you think was the most valuable for your career?
I think probably my mind always goes back to Sandbanks because that's where it sort of began for me as an interpretive naturalist. Prior to that, I had never been in a position where I was allowed to teach people. And I think probably Sandbanks was probably my favorite spot to be, and where I gained the most experience, practical experience. But everywhere I went, you know, like Quinte Conservation, you know, I found myself doing new things and learning new skills. Maybe I didn't do them well, but, you know, I learned them at least anyway.
Okay, getting down towards the end of the questions. If anyone has any more questions, type them into the chat function. Here's one. Where can I find written books or booklets about nature in Prince Edward County?
Specific to Prince Edward County, probably Books and Company in Picton. I know they have a lot of local field guides there. Unfortunately, my book that I did on the birds of Prince Edward County in 1984, I think it was, that's out of print. Now there is Ron Weir's book, Birds of Kingston, which sort of pertains to this area. So that's a really good book to have if you're starting out in birding and want to know the average arrival dates and departure dates and everything like that. But there are some little guides and so forth. I was going to be working this winter until I got started with my new book, Growing Up Big Island. I was going to be starting a book on birding site guides, a birding site guide to Prince Edward County. So there are guides. There was a little wildflower guide written by Court Noxon. I think that's sold out now. So you just have to, you know, keep your eyes and ears open, I guess. And the local store in Bloomfield or on Westlake Road is a good place to go because they specialize in local books. So if there are any guides to be had, that's the place to go in the summer when it's open.
And there's a local guide to butterflies as well at Books and Company.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's still available, I think.
Two more questions here. Obviously, the South Shore is unique. What do you think the most important next steps are to protect it?
Not allow any building, that's for sure, any development. It is a special place. I've, you know, done birding and nature study over most of that area, and it's very remote. We hope to keep it remote. I know there's a lot of concern about ATVs and hunting down there, but I think it's a large enough area that we can accommodate both interests and we can work together. I think they are just as interested as we are in protecting the South Shore. And I'm just so glad that I'm alive to see all this being done at the South Shore. I mean, you know, when I was growing up, the South Shore was just a desolate place, and you know, there was no interest in it. And today there is, and that's wonderful.
I think one of the side effects of potential industrial development down there is that we became very aware of what we had down there, and there was a lot of interest in protecting it. And so now you're seeing these huge tracts going to the Nature Conservancy and Hastings Prince Edward Land Trust, and that's phenomenal.
Oh, it is. And
Okay,
it's generating all positive comments too. I noticed, like, no one's against it.
Yes, this is one thing we can all agree on. Last question. Every time a new house is built on my road, and this person says there have been 40 since 2004, we lose 2 acres of natural habitat to monoculture grass desert. What can we do to educate developers and newcomers so that we do better?
Well, you can educate, but you're probably not going to make much progress because, like I said earlier, at the end of the day, it's all about money. And I don't think there's a whole lot you can do, you know, and it's sad because you're speaking in terms of 2 acres. Well, it doesn't seem like much, but a little bit here, 2 acres there, and it all adds up. And as a result, wildlife doesn't have any habitat, and we're pushing them right out. We're taking all their habitat away from them, and their numbers are decreasing as a result. Over the years, I've seen such a decrease in certain species, you know, as a result of a higher human population. It's I don't know what the answer is. I don't know when it's going to end. If it
I'm
does.
just so grateful that there are big chunks being protected, especially continuous chunks down on the South Shore.
Yeah,
Okay.
someone once, I just want to add this, someone once told me, he said, in time, down the road, the only nature that we're going to be seeing is what's in fenced areas, you know, fenced off areas, you know, and that's kind of sad to think it's come to that. I'm sorry, go ahead.
And that was it. Okay, anything else you want to add before we close?
Nothing, but even though I call myself retired, you know, I'm always here if anyone wants to make any suggestions or ask any questions. I have Facebook presence. You can contact me through there or through my website at naturestuff.net, where there is a contact page. I should point out that that website's only going to be up in its current form for another 2 weeks, and then we're changing over to WordPress, so it's going to have a whole new look. I think it's going to have the same address though. Sprague at explorenet.com is my email address. I'm more than happy to give you my phone number, 613-848-4549. I know I sounded like an auctioneer there. I'll repeat it, 613-848-4549. Feel free to call or contact me anytime.
Okay, thank you very, very much, Terry. And John, now I'm going to hand back to you.
Well, thank you so much. I'm going to try and share my screen again here. Let's see if this works. So just briefly wanted to say thank you so much, Terry, for kind of the story of your life. I guess that's what it is. Fascinating conversation. And Pamela, thank you so much for leading Terry through it in such a marvelous fashion. Terry, I think it's safe to say that you have educated and inspired generations of folks in the county. And doesn't seem like you show any signs of stopping anytime soon. So we look forward to doing this again sometime. So again, thank you very much. That was a fascinating conversation. I'm just going to finish off then with a little more information about the South Shore Joint Initiative. And it was interesting, there were questions about protecting the South Shore. And there's 41 plus reasons why we are advocating. And that, of course, is the species at risk. We recently published a guide to Prince Edward County South Shore, important bird area, to raise public awareness on the area, and it includes information on the area and the 41 species of risk that can be found there, complete with maps. These guides can be found at local LCBO locations, and they would be found at other locations if they were allowed to be open, but the recent lockdown and stay-at-home order has kind of put that on hold for now. However, if you are a local business owner and would like to display these guides, you can request them via our website. Spanning 26 kilometers, the South Shore Important Bird and Biodiversity Area is Canada's largest and last undeveloped Lake Ontario natural landscape and shoreline, and we are advocating for all of South Shore IBA public lands to be conserved, safeguarded from development, and protected by management plans established with public input. With our local, provincial, and national partners, we are working to ensure that existing wildlife policies and legislation are addressed, engage people in South Shore nature and recreational activities, make a significant contribution to Ontario's terrestrial and marine diversity protection, and help mitigate climate change by protecting important natural habitat. So obviously, to learn more, you can go to our website, ssji.ca. You can subscribe to the South Shoreliner e-newsletter, follow us on social media, share our content. This webinar this evening will be posted shortly on YouTube, and so it can be you can make that available to anybody to look at if they like. And of course, you can become a member and help us continue our positive momentum. On February 17th, we'll be holding the next in our series of free webinars, this time to celebrate Flashback February in the county. An internationally known architect, Edwin Rouse, will be discussing the Hudgen House restoration project and will be taking questions from people who are looking to preserve their own home. You can RSVP for this event also on our website. And just most of you know this, of course, but this is kind of what we're so proud of right now. On September 10th last year, the Minister of the Environment announced the government's intention to make the Point Peter Provincial Wildlife Area and Ostrander Point Crown Land Block a conservation reserve. Because it was announced doesn't mean that this area will necessarily become a reserve. It's being studied by the province. These areas are still under threat, and continued public engagement and advocacy work is needed to ensure that the South Shore will be permanently protected for future generations. So we hope that everyone who hasn't already will join us at the South Shore Joint Initiative in this effort. And again, more about us can be found out on ssji.ca or find us on Facebook or on Instagram. So again, I'd like to thank Pamela Stagg and Terry Sprague. Fascinating conversation. Also the organizers who helped make this possible. And I will wish everybody good evening.